So Jeremy Bazell, and I am a Generation X white male with short brown hair. I am wearing a pair of brown rimmed glasses, a purple shirt with a purple bow tie. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start when I talk about the National Park Service by refamiliarizing you with the National Park Service, because many of you have been to a national park and think you know what the National Park Service is, but it's really important when we talk about accessibility to understand how the structure of the Park Service works. So we have 400 plus units of the National Park Service. 50 or 60 of them are capital N, capital P national parks. That's Yosemite, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, heavy hitters. But we also have things like the Statue of Liberty, and we have Independence Square in Philadelphia. So it's not just outdoor stuff. We've got a lot of historic things, a lot of monuments. Most of Washington, D.C. is part of the Park Service. I am going to be focusing mostly on the outdoor piece of this, however. Anyone who wants to, I saw was the panel, people talking about historic access. Anybody who wants to talk about that, you can, I don't think it's you can date me, but you can out of the box me later. I have a canned presentation on that as well. So we get over 300 million visitors a year. Our budget is roughly $3 billion a year. Check back on January 21st to see if that's still true. And so the group that I work with is Park Accessibility for Visitors and Employees. We provide accessibility policy, training, technical assistance, and outreach to all 400 of those units. You are looking at 1/4 of the staff of what we call PAVE, because we say we're paving the way for accessibility in our national parks. But the important thing to know, so I work out of the Washington, D.C. office. However, I don't have line authority over anybody. I don't get to tell a park, you're going to do this. I don't have any money that I give to any park to do anything related to accessibility. We are there to serve as consultants, subject matter experts, people who preach the gospel, people who try to help parks be accessible because they are their own self-operating units. But they're hiring things like people who understand bats and people who understand caves and people who understand bears. They're not hiring people who understand accessibility. So that's where we come in. However, this is my third time doing this. The crowd gets bigger every time. My presentation gets worse every time. We like talking to groups like you because I don't want to be the person that the park calls and says, hey, we've got this accessibility challenge, what do we do? And then I come solve it. I want to call a local disability organization and say, hey, can you come help this park solve it? So we want to be a connector in the space rather than the people who solve the problems. The other thing that's really important about us is that we have spent a long time as an organization looking at accessibility through a civil rights lens and through a legal obligation compliance lens. And not that that's a bad thing to do. However, it has been really helpful for me to be a part of this conversation because looking at it through a tourism lens is a very different proposition. And I'll talk about some of the ways that we have altered our approach, moving away from focusing on civil rights and compliance more toward the visitor experience. So we have in the National Park Service what we call a visitor experience cycle, probably similar to what they have in the tourism industry, where first we know that people are going to plan their visit, they're going to travel to a park, they're going to arrive and be oriented, then they're going to have experiences while they're there, then they're going to leave, and then they're going to have some recollection. Obviously, from a disability perspective, I want people to get to stage 6, recollection, and think, what a great experience we had, rather than think, I need to file a complaint with the Department of Justice. Okay, so now what I have tried to do in our work in the Park Service is map that to the 3 pillars of accessibility tourism, which I borrowed from SAGE Inclusion. I don't know if John or anybody's here. Anyway, tried to figure out, like, how do I map this to this idea of the pillars of accessible inclusion, meaning the pillars are, do we have accessible facilities? Do we have accessible customer service? And how is our information? And that has strongly influenced the way we have prioritized our work in the Park Service. I've been there 10 years. Park Service has been doing this since 1972 when Section 504 was passed. So we really have been changing a lot based on taking this tourism lens to things. And I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to skip that next one because that gets too complicated. So we got those three pillars, right? We got the information, we got facilities, we've got customer service. I actually tackled them in a different priority order than the three that I presented on there. The first thing we are really, really focusing on right now from a national level of proactive work with parks is what we do to improve the information that is available about our parks, about accessibility. Because we think it's very important to mitigate expectations, number one, but also more importantly, to provide the kind of information that you need as an individual with a disability to make decisions for yourself about what is or is not accessible. So the image I have up here is actually three different toilets. There are toilets from ancient Rome, there are toilets from the mid-20th century, and there is a new construction which follows like all of the guidelines of the international code compliance, including actually even an adult-sized changing table, right? So if we were to say we have a bathroom, which one am I talking about when I say we have a bathroom? All three of these are bathrooms, but not all bathrooms are created equal, right? So what we want to do is we want to move away from our traditional model where we say such and such visitor center has an accessible bathroom. What does that mean? Because the way it works for us is we could have had a bathroom that was built in 1974 and it was accessible according to the standards in 1974. People expect something different from that, right? This trail is accessible. We have accessible parking. Well, what does that mean, right? So we're trying to work with parks to really help them move away from using the word accessible and to instead provide detailed information about the current conditions that actually exist. So one thing that we have done is we have guidelines for park accessibility websites. Every park has an accessibility website, all 400 units, right? So we have guidelines for the quality and quantity and structure of the information that they are supposed to provide. Again, I don't have line authority over anyone. I cannot tell them you're going to fill this out in the following way. I can give them guidelines. But because there was a great deal of variation from one park site to another, we then develop what we call a Park Accessibility Information Review, or a PAIR, we call it, where we can look at your park's website, and then we go out to your park with a team of people who understand this stuff, and we will literally hand you a report that says, put this on your website. Your website should say this about your park accessibility features. Because the parks have neither the capacity to do that, nor generally do they have the know-how. We also have been launching pilots for accessibility visitor use guides. And the difference between what we do in a park accessibility information review, which is basically about helping you update your website, is the website falls into the trip planning, right? An accessibility visitor guide is the thing that we hand you when you show up at the park. So two different pieces of information. And also we like to have the accessibility visitor use guides really give you some idea of, oh, when I go to it helps plan your visit in a different way by identifying, well, you might want to take this route or take that route. Then we also have come out with a set of campground information standards. Because again, I don't want to say, we can say this is an accessible campsite. again, what does that mean, number one? But number two, I have been to a lot of parks where the accessible campsite is in an area with 4 other sites that might not be accessible according to the law, but are so close that I'm going to say they're usable, right? And I want to tell you about all of those sites, because the accessible site might be booked, but you might see a picture of the other site and say, I can make that one work, right? So to, again, have a consistent way of describing, and even better, showing through pictures, which, yes, we do tag and describe, because we know that people with visual disabilities can't use the pictures in the same way, so that we can have consistent information about our campgrounds. So we also then, for the first time, created a national level website on accessibility. Before, what we had was a system by which if you were interested in going to Yosemite, you go to Yosemite's website, you look up their accessibility information. Now, if you want to go to our national site, it's going to have a map, and you can just click on whatever park you want, and it's going to take you straight to the accessibility information for that park, which hopefully has been crafted because you had a park accessibility information review done by us. Hopefully, emphasis on hopefully. So we're looking at, so number one, a park accessibility information review. That really consists in a lot of cases about general information related to parking, visitor centers, commonly used features of a park, right? Then you go down from there, and if a park happens to have campgrounds, we now have campground information standards that we're slowly trying to update so we can tell you what the current conditions of the campsites are, as opposed to telling you this one is accessible or is not accessible. Then if you go down one level further, as you heard from a number of speakers, there is a major emphasis on providing better trail information, so that we are not saying that such and such trail is or accessible or is not accessible. And the concept that we use in talking about that is, we have an idea about accessible hiking, right? Accessible hiking is we modify the trail in order to reduce barriers to mobility devices. Adaptive hiking is you have a device that can overcome the barriers. And in order for you to use that device, you have to know enough about the trail to know, oh yes, I could take this device this far, or if I had assistance, etc. So those are all the things that we are doing in the arena of trying to improve information. So here's a little picture of our little map with our little pins dropped on it, which you can click and it'll give you the accessibility, take you straight to the accessibility page of any of our websites. And then, so this is an idea of, this is actually from a park website. So this is what we have on a lot of sites right now. Accessible bathrooms are available at all 3 visitor center locations, as well as many accessible outhouses located throughout the seashore. All right, there are several beach access ramps along the seashore. Again, no photos, nothing that indicates, well, what do we mean by accessible? When was it built? You know, versus a park that we have had an accessibility information review where we're now saying the parking lot is in front of and behind the ranger station. There's one accessible space in the front and the back. Both are marked accessible on the actual pavement, but have no signs that specify van accessible parking. Both spots have an access aisle. All markings on the pavement are faded. And then there's a picture of the actual parking lot so that you could see what does the accessible parking look like. Or, from the back parking, you must ascend a steep hill to access the entrance. The front parking is adjacent to the ranger station entrance. Visitors must pull the handle down on the non-assisted front door and open it to the right, which may require more than 5 pounds of force to open. The single door to enter the ranger station is 35 inches wide, and visitors must navigate over a threshold to enter. So that's a very different level of information from visitor center is accessible. Parking lot is accessible. So that's what we are trying to aim for, but you have to multiply that by 420 parks, and then within those 420 parks, dozens and dozens of sites. The same thing for trails, where we are trying to, go back. Okay, so for example, we want to provide you with the grades related to the trail, the length, the kind of surface, the slopes, the cross slopes, the widths, which is, we have found, information that is necessary but not sufficient. It's very helpful to give you some idea what the trail conditions are, but we're not telling you, for example, well, so it says the average trail width is 60, the minimum is 54, but what this doesn't tell you is, oh, by the way, where it shrinks to 54 is also where it's got the highest grade, right? And the average grade is 6.2%, the maximum grade is 19%. That's a pretty big difference. It probably would help you to know, where is that 19%? How much of it is at 19%, right? Without having that information, telling you that 19% is not that helpful. Is that the first mile? Is it the 5th mile? Does it go on for 10 feet? Does it go on for 100 yards, right? So we really want to be able to, again, refine that information that goes beyond the basic requirements that we have for providing trail information, and do something a lot more like this, where we provide multiple images of the trail. And we provide a verbal description of the trail in addition to just providing the measurements, which, like I said, in and of themselves are helpful, but do not tell the whole story. Because what we have heard from people with disabilities is that they start with this information, and then they go to all trails, and then they go to a different thing, and they sort of do this patchwork of putting information together to get a full picture of what the trail actually looks like, both from our perspective, but also from the user perspective. All right, so that's all the stuff we are doing. Again, that first pillar, or one of the pillars, about information that we are at the national level trying to support all of our parks to get better at. Certainly we haven't touched all 400 of them, but it's a high priority for us. The other piece is customer service. I can give you all of the information about the parks that I want to make you say, all right, great. Like, I know I want to go, and I'm going to take my bomber or whatever it is on this trail at this park because I got all the information I want. But if you show up and we give you a bad experience, all that upfront information we gave you is now being thrown out the window, right? I'm not saying people don't file complaints because things aren't accessible or because of civil rights. 9 times out of 10, if you file a complaint, it's because you were treated poorly by somebody. It is because somebody did not say, yeah, let me work with you on this, right? So, a number of things that we provide customer service training about are, a big one is reasonable modifications and the interactive process, which for us is getting away from the knee-jerk reaction of we start with no. You ask me for something funky, that I think is funky, and I say, no, we can't do that. And we're saying, that's not the starting place. The starting place is, yes, let's see what we can do. Because again, much like, whether you're a hotel or an airline, we are very risk averse, right? So we're going to be like, we don't say, I don't know, let me check. We just say, no. That's a bad starting point. So what can we do to get people to understand that the interactive process doesn't necessarily equal, the individual gets what they want every time, but it means we have an obligation to work with you to see if there is a solution we can come to, because we all want you to enjoy this experience. We have a lot of work that we have to do with our concessions operations, because within that whole infrastructure I was talking about, like if there's a hotel, if there's a restaurant, that's actually not being run by the Park Service. We have contracted that out to hoteliers and food service people. So they've got a whole different infrastructure, and there's a big one of the big things that happens is we find that some of the customer service problems we have actually come from the concessionaire end as opposed to like our rangers themselves. So how do we educate them about their obligations to provide good customer service to people with disabilities? How do we provide knowledge of opportunities and information about the availability of effective communication? If you do not know that a park visitor center has a hearing loop system or an assisted listening system, or you do not know how to ask a park for a sign language interpreter, that's a problem. Because number one, we should have those available to you, but number two, we shouldn't be hiding the fact that we have those things available, right? We don't want to make it hard for you to access that. So helping parks understand the importance of doing a number of things operationally. For example, do you know where those assistive devices are? Do you know if they are charged? Does everyone know how to use them? So that when somebody shows up and says, hi, I would like to use your assistive listening system, the people aren't like, well, let me go ask somebody. Oh, it hasn't been charged. And they're trying five different ones of them because they haven't tested them. Those sort of operational things are a big part of customer service, because even if we have the functionality, we have to make sure it's working every time. We want to provide better customer service about the use of mobility devices, right? And what I mean by that is when you show up and you're using something that doesn't look like grandma's wheelchair that came out of a hospital, that we don't go, ooh, I'm not sure you can take that on that trail. I'm concerned about damage to the resource. As opposed to understanding what people's rights are related to the use of mobility devices and being able to engage in a conversation. We have situations in which our people will decide for you, oh, well, it's too dangerous for you to take that on that trail. And helping our people understand that's not your choice to make. Your obligation is to say, sir, let me tell you about this trail so that you understand what it's like, right? Which is the same obligation we have. I was at a park called Apostle Islands, where I don't know if anybody ever been, but it's on the lake. And there's literally a ranger there who does nothing but try to dissuade people from kayaking. Like, are you a professional? Do you have a professional kayak? Are you aware that if a storm blows through, we're 20 minutes away from the closest Coast Guard station, right? Their job is but they don't ever tell that person, you're not allowed, right? But how many people wouldn't hesitate to be like, oh, sir, you with the wheelchair, you're not allowed to do that. I think that's too dangerous for you. Again, trying to tell them it's the same thing. Our job is to provide you with the information for you to make the decision for yourself. Service animals. That's another big one where we have parks that have bark rangers and are very open to pets and animals. There are other parks where it is actually a resource concern. If you go to a place like Isle Royal, where they have wolves and there's a legitimate concern about canine disease transmission. Well, what are your rights as a person with a disability around service animals, and how do we make sure that everyone in the park knows what are the questions that you're allowed to ask? When are there times that you shouldn't ask that question because that person has probably been asked that question 50 times today before they got to us, and they're probably pretty sick of answering it. And what do I do when I suspect that somebody is trying to get one over on me and say this is a service animal when it's actually a pet? Like having that conversation with our staff about how to deal with those situations. And then responding to neurodiversity, that's one of the things that we have a lot of parks that actually at the grassroots level are doing a lot of work around figuring out how can we have sensory-friendly days? Are there things we should be turning off? Because we've literally got one visitor center where when you come around a corner, you show up and it's a Civil War battle and there's guns shooting at you. And somebody somewhere thought that would be really neat. We're like, hey, maybe you should warn people that when they turn this corner, there's going to be flashes and pops and guns. So, trying to again, help them understand neurodiversity first, and then what are the things that you might be doing that is not great for people on the autism spectrum, and what are the things you could proactively do to attract a neurodiverse audience to the park. This is an example of what we like to see. It's getting eager on me. What we like to see at a park, for example, is, I want you to show up, and if you're blind, I want there on the right-hand side, there is a tactile map of the visitor center itself, so that I understand what the layout is, and I'm not forced to go through every single room to figure out where I'm going. If I know I want to go to such and such room, I can just find it and I can go there. But this tactile map is in a visitor center, and we have a map of the whole park, which puts that visitor center in context of where it is in the park. And then once you go through the rooms in the visitor center, there are, example, tactile models of things like the airplane. This is at Wright Brothers, so like there's a tactile model of the airplane. So that you're getting a tactile experience from orientation through the content and back, as well as you're gonna show up and we know, oh, hey, we've got this device where you can get an audio descriptive tour that then works in concert with our tactile things. All right. Is that 2 minutes? Okay, great. I'm going to skip all that. And lastly, with facilities, what I will tell you is we have learned that what we need to do is we need to follow opportunities rather than try to create opportunities, which means I want to find out, where are you investing your money, park? Because I'm going to tell you, whatever you're investing your money in, that's a hidden accessibility project and you didn't know it. If your park is investing, or whatever it is, if you're investing in something people walk on or walk in, that's an accessibility project. I don't like to have a separate funding stream for accessibility, because as soon as you have extra funding, that extra funding can be taken away. It has to be baked into all of our facilities projects. And then the last thing is trying to take a holistic approach versus a piecemeal approach, where I want to look at, if you're doing something related to your transportation system and you're replacing your fleet, great. Do we know enough about the pickup and drop-off points to say, based on this fleet, do we need to update your pickup and drop-off points? Is there a route from the parking lot to the visitor center? So basically trying to take what we call an entry to exit experience and figure what are all the things that we need to update rather than just this one little thing. But lastly, skipping some of these, the last thing that I really want to talk about is we are focused very much on success rather than deficits. And that's like a flip in our model, which is, let's not talk, not that we don't talk about it, but like we need to promote where we're getting it right. We need to be driving people to the places where we get it right. We need to be making parks jealous of the other places that are getting it right, so they want to have one of those too, right? And we want to be able to also not make you say, I want to go to Yosemite, what's accessible about it? I want you to have information for when you say, I want to kayak. Where can I go kayaking in a national park? And then I can tell you, here's all the national parks that have accessible kayak launches. So that's sort of our aspirational, where we would like to get, again, as our national proactive initiatives that we are trying to assist each of the 400 parks to work on. So it's job security for me anyway. So thank you very much. Did I get it?